Wind Translation Project Manager Olga Haznaci delivered a presentation to share some of the insights and considerations we have learned from working with Inuktut language translations for over a decade.
Wind Translation is a woman-led business with more than 20 years in business. You see here Hui Pinjan, she is the owner. She has been driving this for a long time, and it's amazing to see how she's leading it. We are Ottawa-based. The main office is in Ottawa, but we do have a remote team of up to 10 people that are actually working from different locations in Canada and internationally. And the network of translators and linguists and language keepers that we work with, it's truly spans from coast to coast to coast. We mainly do translation and also started to offer interpretation services. Although one out of 4 projects that we work with involves Inuktut language, we also work with 40 plus languages and dialects spoken in Canada, especially the dialects spoken in northern, central, and eastern Canada. Apart from translation and interpretation, we also offer different language-related services such as voiceover, transcription. We can consult you on a dialect, which dialect you need, and we offer desktop publishing, which is just supporting more complex formats, publishing formats like InDesign. Some of the partnerships that we are proud of. Today we're talking about Inuit language, let's call it this, like this for starters. How did it become, get to be so unique? Because it truly is a unique language. Depending on who you ask, in Canada right now, there are actually 3 or 4 different languages that are spoken by Inuit in Inuit communities. All of them stemmed from the same language. The answer to that question would be in the fact that historically the Inuit communities, they occupied a very large, vast territory, and because it was for the major part of its existence, it was an oral language. So there were different communities created their own ways of calling different things and their ways of pronouncing different things. So right now there's a great variety of different ways of say something, write something, and call something. And in modern Canada, there are more than 10 dialects, 3 or 4, depending on who you ask, languages. In Labrador and Newfoundland and Labrador, they speak the language that they called Inuktitut or Inuktut. In Nunavik, they're speaking Inuktitut language dialect of Nunavik dialect of Inuktitut. One of the most common dialects spoken by more than half of the population of the Inuit is the Baffin dialect, spoken in the Baffin Island of Nunavut. However, there are other dialects spoken in Nunavut, Kivalliq dialect, Netsilik dialect, Palirmut dialect, Ivilik. In the westernmost parts of Nunavut, they speak Inuktun, which is considered to be a different language, and it's this state, the prospect for that language is actually not good. So right now they're really starting to create initiatives to revitalize the language because the number of speakers is so low. And in Northwest Territories, they speak also a different dialect of Inuktun as well as Inuvialuktun. And the Siglitun you see here is also spoken in Northwest Territories. It's kind of a transition between the Inuktun and Inupiat, which is spoken in the westernmost parts of northern Canada and in Alaska. So what's the difference? It's not only about how you pronounce things, it's also greatly about how you write things. So if we take a word, the English word moon, if you go to Nunavut, you would write it using the syllabics. if you go to Labrador, Newfoundland and Labrador, you would write it in Roman orthography. Same as in Northwest Territories, and same as in western part of Nunavut, where they speak Inuktun, which is Roman orthography based. But you can see still that even the spelling is still very different, and it comes from the fact that the initiatives to turn the oral Inuktitut language into written language came from different people at different time due to the vastness of the territory. And as a result, in Labrador, there's a Greenlandic influence. That's why they're using that big K there. In Northwestern Territories, they have their own variation, and Inuktun was influenced by the fact that in 1970s there was an effort throughout Nunavut to create standardized writing system. So they sort of are, respecting that system that was created for them. And right now, modern efforts, Inuit-led efforts, led by ITK, resulted in them creating this unified Inuktut writing system. So in 1970s, I will mention that there was the ICI standard. It was the initiative led by Southerners to try to standardize the way Inuit people wrote. And they did develop it, although many of the communities from the West and from the East felt that they were underrepresented, felt that they were not heard, and the way they write and speak were not included in that. Even as far as Nunavik, Nunavik, although they do use very similar system, they have a whole different symbol in their writing system for a different sound that is very unique for Nunavik. That's how you can recognize if there's a, Inuktitut, Nunavik Inuktitut, because of that unique symbol there. And so because of that, there has always been, there was always a pressure to create something that would be Inuit-led and respectful of all the dialects. And the efforts, I'm not sure when it was started, not so long ago, but just last year they came up with the unified Inuktitut writing after multiple consultations with local communities. And right now they're trying to use it as a way to involve youth, because it's a system that's very easy to write. It doesn't have any special characters. You can write it basically on your phone. And it's a good, right now, it's a good alternative to when you're trying to reach a lot of different communities, but you don't have the budget for that. And we actually had a project with ITK where they tried to do just that, and they consulted with the communities and they said, okay, yes, let's go with the unified Inuktitut writing. And if we have any questions, then we'll just pinpoint those. And so if you're working on a report for, Iqaluit or Nunavut government, then it's relatively easy. You just make sure that you use someone who is ICI compliant. But if you're trying to reach different audiences, then you might want to consider alternatives or just to keep that in mind. Another different issue with, not an issue, a challenge with Inuktitut translation projects and when you're writing a document that is meant to be translated, is terminology. So as you can understand, our societies are creating new concepts every day, new words are being introduced every day, and even for a language as English, it's hard to keep up. But for a language spoken by 70,000 people, it's very hard to keep up. So the community is doing their best to try to come up with different terms. The GN government regularly holds meetings. There are many initiatives here in Ottawa as well, with their local communities that have a lot of linguists and translators to try to come up with new terminology to support development of the language. But whenever you're making trying to write a report, just consider using plain language. if there's a term that you may want to replace with something that's easier to understand without losing the meaning, just do that. And make sure also to, if you're working on a project where there are terms that has to be translated, you might want to make sure that those terms are being understood correctly, so that the translator, if he doesn't know the word, if the word doesn't exist, then at least he can describe, or they can describe that word correctly. Regarding the timelines for translation projects, our translators are mostly not professional translators, even for a very, a relatively common language as in Inuktut, that's spoken by a large number of people. That's why they mostly work on the weekends or in the evenings. They they have other things on their plate, on their agenda throughout the day, so we try to give them more time to work on the project, especially if it's a project that does require a little bit of research, a little bit of sitting and thinking about how to translate this or that term correctly. Sometimes the translators they get together to translate something, come up with a good description of a word. That's why it's important to give them time. So we usually estimate 300 to 400 words per day, and minimum time is up to 5 business days, just to reach out to the translator, make sure that he is there, he's available, he's not going anywhere, he's not hunting, he's not traveling south or back. So that takes some time. And as the revision is another challenge when it comes to translating into Inuktitut, because first of all, because of the spelling is not everywhere standard. So it's hard to define what is a mistake and what is not a mistake. Is this written or is this translated correctly or not? It depends on who you ask. And second of all, there is a tight-knit community. So oftentimes if one person translated, if we go and try to find someone to revise it, unless they may know each other, so they may be very cautious of doing that kind of work. So oftentimes we rely on the translators who team up. They have someone, a reviser that they trust, and they do the revision themselves. And it's standard for us as an alternative. We just, first of all, we ask the translator to provide a revision, a round of revision themselves after they finish translation. And if there's a PDF involved, if the format involves, the final document is in PDF format, then we encourage the clients to send the document over to us, and the translator will revise that as well. First of all, it gives them the additional time to, the additional opportunity to make sure that there's no, spelling mistakes, nothing slipped there. And second of all, it gives the additional peace of mind that everything, all the layout was done correctly, and there's no, mistakes, doubling of words. Things may happen sometimes, and it's good to catch them. Another thing that we find ourselves helping our clients and our translators is the file formats. We really try to make it easier for our translators to work on something. And I know that for many of our clients, it may be the stumbling block when you have an Excel file, for example, with financial statements, and there are all those numbers, and you send it to the translator. It's very tedious work. And sometimes, the formatting is broken. There are things. So we're trying to just turn it into something like this for them to, do their job, making sure that it's easy for them to see what is translated, what is not translated, something that's, they don't have a lot of headache over. And then they send it back to us. We use the special translation tool, language industry standard tool, that unfortunately doesn't support the syllabics too well, but it is still very good when it comes to, you know, checking the file for consistency, when it comes to checking the file of whether everything was translated or not, when it comes to breaking the text into these kind of very digestible pieces, and leave the numbers, especially if they're like separated numbers that translators won't need even to, you know, bother with. Some of our translators are using different fonts, especially for Kiva-League or Ivy League, those dialects that are on the western side of Nunavut and Northwest Territories. Sometimes we get, you know, we have issues with them being used for publishing formats. So we do provide support for that. We have all the fonts, you know, we have had experience. We have made many mistakes, all the mistakes that you can possibly think of when it comes to fonts and file formats. So we provide that support for our clients. And we do also, if a client requests, provide support with desktop publishing, because as you said, Michelle, there's sometimes, you know, you need to fix the layout when you're turning it from simple Word to a more complex format as InDesign. The layout may suffer, especially considering the fact that Inuktitut has a different, you know, the words in Inuktitut are on average larger than the words in English, and on the average the text itself is larger. That's why it's important to you know, correct that layout very carefully. And also, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that we know that it's very important for Inuit to treat their traditional knowledge with respect. And we know that in every aspect of life, Inuit are striving to consider first their Inuit, the traditional principles that they have. The different principles of that Inuit knowledge are respecting others, respecting your relationships and caring for people, fostering good spirit by being open, welcoming, and inclusive, serving and providing for family and community, or both, decision-making through discussion and consensus, development of skills through practice, effort, and action, working together for a common cause, being innovative and resourceful, and being respectful and caring for the land, animals, and the environment. So we do acknowledge that those are very important to the translators that we work with. We love our translators and cherish relationships with them. And that's why we try to apply these principles as much as possible in our daily life. And we also, in turn, expect the clients to acknowledge them as well. Each of our translators have their own story, and it's amazing, you know. I think since I started working with wintranslation, my life has become richer, and you know, just knowing the stories, hearing what they've been through, how they go about their day, it helps you to decenter, definitely. And the passion that they have for the language is insurmountable. It helps us, and it helps us serve our clients as well as we do, and we are very grateful for them. So I wanted also to acknowledge that with my presentation. To sum up, sort of, what can you expect from us if you work on Inuktut translation, and things that you might consider working on yourself when you're preparing a document? We provide wholesome approach to translation, and we encourage, when you're preparing a source text, really think about the community that's going to be reading that source text. Make it as simple as possible, as direct as possible, and consider the interests of the audience or of the community you're preparing it for. We do provide dialect consultation. However, our clients especially the ones that are working with environment, they did give me feedback that sometimes it's also important to work with local partners to make sure that the vocabulary is still relevant, because there are cases when we provide a good translation, but just for that local community, one term, a name of the fish or something is translated a little bit differently, and it's important for them to have it their way, right? So that's why we're always open for discussion and accepting different ways. Compliance with ICI and unified Inuktut spelling. We do work with translators that are ICI compliant and translators that have been working with the new spelling. We do also work with local translators from the Northwest Territories and in Labrador. So we provide a variety of spelling. But from the client, we're always asking, the first thing we're asking is the dialect. What dialect do you need? Where is the community that you're taking this document to? We use modern tools. I already gave you a couple of examples of that, and unfortunately, unfortunately, none of our translators use those tools as well, and there are a number of reasons for that. But we do provide, we do try to give as much of support and make their life still easier and the quality of the document as high as we can using the tools that we have at our disposal. And support of different fonts and file formats. We always try to have an open discussion with the client, how the process looks like for them. Do they have someone on their end to do the layout, to do the design? If not, we do provide the support, and we can turn the document from English into Inuktitut here in-house. But we are always open for different workflows. Thank you so much. I hope I've tried to cover as much, or make it also digestible. But I know there was a lot of different things, and I know that you already definitely have experience with Inuktitut translation. So I welcome your feedback. I'm curious to know what's important for you, what were your takeaways, and what questions do you have?